Welcome back to another episode of Art World Confessions. Today I have an amazing work on paper. I think you can see some of it. I'll post the image as well, perhaps as an overlay. But that's by an Israeli artist, Yuri Dotan. The image shows a Palestinian mother and child, two women, and they're, excuse me, they're on the beach, and maybe they're not on the beach anymore. You might wonder what that has to do with today's episode of Art World Confessions, but I think I really have to say something about what I personally experienced recently in terms of men in my life. And I'm talking about men who I've had intimate relationships with, men who I have not been intimate with, men who guys that I've worked with or not worked with. And as I said that, I remembered a few years back, before I had a son and was less out there were a bunch of guys who would go around saying that they had quote unquote been with me. These are guys that I just knew socially or was friendly to every now and again. Maybe I had a drink with them, but they certainly hadn't been with me. And I see the same thing happening now with someone else who's recently divorced in the art world. It's not that she's a good friend of mine, but I just hear what people are saying and it really kind of pisses me off, because it all ties into this sort of male violence. Male violence, not just in the art world, but in the world at large. And this, somehow we have to stop it. I mean, as women, we need to support each other in this, and men, you need to talk to each other and get your head straight around this. So I'm going to go from the personal back out to the big picture again. But in my own life, I couldn't rely on one man, not one man I'd worked with, not one man that I knew, not one man I had been close to, not one man who I wasn't close to. Absolutely no man would step up and help in a certain situation that I just had to handle all by myself. However, in the bigger world, just based on that episode where I mentioned when love stops paying bills, there are women who marry very young. They go from their dad's house straight to their husband's house, and they never really learn how to manage things in what I call the matrix. They never learn how to manage a house, how to manage a business, how to pay bills, how to raise money, all of the things that men struggle to do in at least the Western world, so that they can put a roof over their children's head or go further than that, buy art, cars, boats, blah, 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 and just become like masters of the universe. A lot of women just go under these powerful, wealthy men and in order to get what you call quote unquote protection. But this protection comes at a cost, and the cost is, one, we ourselves don't have the skills to take care of ourselves, and two, these men engage in what I call cannibalistic capitalism, where they will eat you and your children for lunch. So yeah, doesn't matter if you have a kid, doesn't matter if you're single, even in a smaller context to that. I remember once I was living in an apartment and the handyman had come over to fix something, and he knew that I was single, he knew that I didn't have a guy, and you could just tell that what he was suggesting to me in terms of fixing the apartment and what it would cost was not what it would cost, and that if I had a man there, the cost would have been different. Subsequent to that, I spoke to another tenant, a male tenant, and he said, "What? He was charging you for that? That's not right." Again, cannibalistic capitalism. Instead of men stepping up to protect women, they just double down and take advantage of them in the nastiest of ways in society. So let's pull the camera out back a little bit and look at this article, for example. There have been a couple articles around, and people think, well, oh, this person is probably looking for media attention. But you know what it's actually showing, all of those articles? It's showing these guys. Google them. Just Google any of these guys. And that's the best advice I can give to any of these women with assets where guys come to quote unquote help them. Or if you're in a certain hard spot and you need a loan or you need some financial help or something, investigate the guys who are coming to quote unquote help you. Because at the end of the day, these guys are never there to help. They're there for themselves, looking out for themselves to take advantage of you. And so said, so done. So again, this is not the first time something like this has happened. If you look at my last episode about when love stops paying bills, but also if you just look at art transactions in the last 10 years or so. I mean, they've probably been happening for millennia, but let's just go back like a couple years, and then you Google this person, this comes up. You Google that person, this comes up. Any of these articles, you just Google this comes up. I mean, this stuff is rampant throughout the world in general, throughout business in general, but in the art world, it's also way too common. And, you know, some people have said to me, well, you have to be careful with this stuff, you know. I'm not saying anything that's not public knowledge. All of this stuff is Googleable. I'm not making up anything off the top of my head and talking about stuff. This stuff is researched by journalists. It's put out there in the quote-unquote mainstream media. And if we didn't know about it already, well, here I am to remind you that it's out there. And if you meet any of these guys, Google them. Google is your best friend. And don't get me wrong, I have my own issues with Google or with any of these big tech companies that have had a hand in, you know, getting rid of those beautiful women, children, 70% of them to be accurate, and then a smattering of hummus around, you know, just like for a little flavor. Now, I'm not advising that women go out there and embrace what I've heard of called the 4B movement. You can just Google that as well to find out what it's about. But in terms of business, you got to do your research. You can't just hope that these guys are going to do what they say or that they're going to act in the right way to make proper business among each other. I mean, I'm going to do a whole other episode in the next few weeks where I'm going to compare the art world to the, was it HBO? Yes, I think it's an HBO series called Succession. I mean, just the nastiness that you see going on. And I'm not saying that this is in every aspect of the art world, but just in certain elements, certain parts of the art world. And all I can say is the more money is involved, the more likely you're going to see these elements show up. I think someone said to me once as well, again, I can't remember who it was. So many people have said so many things to me over the years. Some of them have stuck. But this one person said to me, in order to be a good art dealer, you have to be a little bit of a gangster. And to be honest, I can see it more and more. Again, the higher you go, the more of a gangster you need to be. Because if you're not, these guys will just suck you dry. And to be honest, women have a part in this as well. I mean, they learn from these guys. They learn to protect themselves from these guys. And then they end up, you know, endorsing the same principles that these guys use in this whole cannibalistic capitalist society. So yes, I mean, I used some female examples as well as ones who have come into the art world at the very top and swindled people out of their money or stolen things or just, you know, just nastiness. I mean, not to quote our current president, but you remember when he talked about nasty women? Well, I think it's safe to say that they're nasty men as well. It's just, don't be nasty. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting the bell notification so you know when I upload a new episode of Art World Confessions. Have a great week.